Welcome to the Internet. Live from the Marriott Library at the University of Utah, this is the Red Line Podcast. I'm your host, Connor Dunstan, and these are my co-hosts,
Kyle Holland and
Alex Fielder. Today it's time for another history episode.
Hooray!
This time we're headed to Portland, Oregon, the urbanist mecca of the Northwest. We'll talk past, present, future, all this after the news.
The Amtrak Cascades is finally running from Seattle to Vancouver again after over 2 years of canceled service due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Starting on September 26th, Amtrak will run one daily round trip between the two cities and 2 daily trips as soon as staffing allows. Although this is paltry service, it's certainly a good start towards improving service on the Northwest Corridor.
And aren't they eventually planning on increasing that to 12 trips a day in the long run?
Yeah, it'll be like 12 round trips along the whole of the thing. So that's like Eugene, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, and all that lieth in between.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Well, I guess one's a start.
Yeah, one is a start. And, you know, they were already running, Amtrak was, that is, bus service between Seattle and Vancouver. But, you know...
That ain't rail service.
Boo! Run trains. Trains good, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's you know, it's one of America's most, like, used rail corridors in terms of, like, ridership, for Amtrak at least. So, very good that they're, like, you know, actually running service.
Yeah.
Just saying.
It's crazy. That's not really Amtrak's thing, actually running service outside of the
funny.
Northeast.
They're only allowed to run service on the Northeast Corridor. Everywhere else must be once a day. Otherwise, you get shot.
Yeah.
That's consistent with what I've observed in reality.
In other news, the delay and cost overrun-ridden Honolulu Area Rapid Transit Project has finally begun trial operation of its trains nearly 2 years after the line was originally expected to open. When complete, it will be America's newest metro line and the first to feature modern features like fully automated trains and platform screen doors.
Ooh.
Wait, fully automated trains?
Like,
yeah.
Like the SkyTrain?
Like SkyTrain, like the REM in Montreal, like... Yeah, all sorts of stuff. I mean, we've had automated systems before, but this is the first one that's going to run fully automated from its inception.
So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that how they have platform screen doors working? Is because
You can have platform screen doors with manually operated metro. It's just a little more complicated.
it's harder to stop on the same spot every time?
The exact same spot, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be a little difficult. So, yeah. It should be noted that this is only the first section, and although the entire section was supposed to be opening 2 years ago, the downtown section will not open until 2031.
Oh my goodness.
That's quite a delay.
Like I said, delay and cost overrun.
Some delays these are.
Yeah, and it's also, going to cost $12 billion instead of the estimated $5 billion that it was at the start. So, It got bitten by the American cost snake, as I believe someone someone from China who's on Twitter called it the American cost snake that bites all American rail projects.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah, that's not wrong.
yeah. So, this has been the news. Trademark. Alright, so before we actually get into all of the good transit meat that there is to devour in Portland, we need to sort of provide some context here. So, nestled in the shadow of Mount Hood, Portland is a city of around 650,000 people, making it the 26th largest city in America. The metro area as a whole contains about 2.5 million people, making it the second largest in the Pacific Northwest, and coincidentally, the 25th largest in the country.
That's quite good.
I
That
know,
seems
right?
balanced.
Like that's nothing compared to here, where we're like the 90th or something, and then we're like the same size as their metro area. Like Salt Lake City is 200,000 people.
Well, until we make the city and county of Salt Lake.
Yes. No, but it's a much more compact city.
Because geography?
Well, sort of. It's a very different sort of, I guess you would say, urban form compared to like the Salt Lake metropolitan area, right? The center city plays a lot larger role in like terms of both size, economic life, jobs, all that. So keep that in mind. And yes, as Kyle said, the geography of Portland itself, very interesting. Because sort of downtown is sort of nestled between these like weird tall mountains and the Willamette River, and then it's all kind of flat to the east. But these mountains, they make it so that there can only be one freeway into downtown from the west.
As opposed to 20.
Congestion be like.
Yeah.
The congestion in Portland freeways do go burr.
I mean, good on them for settling a habitable area.
Yes, unlike here, which is not a habitable area and should be abandoned immediately. We're all going to die of arsenic poisoning. It's fine. Yeah, and so just as a general lay of the land, like I said, downtown's nestled between the Willamette River, the Columbia River, and these mountains. To the east of that is most of Portland City proper, which is laid out in kind of a general American grid.
I love the grid.
We do love the grid.
We do love the grid.
Portland International Airport, which is like a pretty major airport. It's probably not as major as like Salt Lake City. Like Salt Lake City does 20 million air trips a year. Portland International does like 11 or 12 normally.
That's still really good.
It's still a big airport, and that's kind of between Portland proper, like the east side of Portland, you would call it, and the Columbia River. So, yeah, keep all that in mind as we talk about things. And then across the river, or the Columbia River, I should say, is the other half of the Portland metropolitan area, which is Vancouver, Washington, which is like 500,000 people in various municipalities.
Budget Vancouver.
Very much budget Vancouver if you've been to Vancouver, Washington, yeah. It's muted now.
Thank you.
You should leave that in.
Just to shame you.
Just to shame me, yeah.
You deserve it.
Okay, and then a couple fun facts about Portland. The metropolitan area, or at least the Oregon part, has the only directly elected regional government in the United States. It's called Metro. Also, they have an urban growth boundary.
I've heard of that.
I have heard of that.
They do. Yeah. And this is a big topic when talking about urbanism in Portland because, you know, there's a lot of people complaining that instead of suburbanification going on the Oregon side of the river, it's all just moved to the Vancouver side in Washington and is just spreading out that direction instead. Because Vancouver, unlike Portland, actually kind of a conservative city, or at least area.
So maybe we should adopt this growth boundary on a larger, more regional scale.
No, bad. Hiss. It's just in your general awareness of the wonderful city of Portland. What are the things that it is nationally known for?
Liberals, protests, and transit.
And homeless.
There you go. So, yes, Portland is very well known for being, I don't know, arguably the most, like, liberal city in the country. Very much. Have you guys ever seen that TV show Portlandia? It's like a skit show.
No, I haven't.
Hilarious. You should watch it. It's hilarious. But it's like sort of exemplifies the sort of like ultra lib that is known for being a Portland resident. And then, yes, homelessness, big problem. Like, only probably Los Angeles has a bigger issue with homelessness in general than Portland does. Just this being an effect of housing being incredibly expensive because people want to live there.
Interesting.
I know.
And also the thing where other regions ship homeless people there.
They used to do that. Now that's illegal because Boise got sued for doing it.
Oh, cool.
Good old Boise.
You think I'm joking? I'm not. Boise literally got sued for doing this, and now cities aren't allowed to ship their homeless people to other places anymore.
I'd never heard of this
yes.
before now.
Fun fact, this is a reason why a lot of cities in red states don't have that many homeless people compared to cities in blue states. They literally forced their homeless people to get on buses and sent them to the West Coast.
Well, when was this?
Oh, for decades.
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
Wow.
Yeah. So they'd literally, if you were homeless in like Jacksonville, Florida, they would give you a bus ticket and be like, have fun in Seattle.
Wow.
Right.
So it's kind of an inherited problem, but also just
it's
own problem.
It was certainly exacerbated by that, yes, but also,
The housing.
housing expensive, and just like every other liberal American city, Portland has one thing that they really like to be regressive about, and that is housing policy. So, yay. Actually, they're a lot better than most liberal cities, but, they're still not great. So, anyway, that's sort of the broader context of the region. Now we get into l'histoire, the history.
Like most American cities, the early transit history of Portland revolves around the streetcar.
Yes.
Horse car service was first introduced in 1872 by the Portland Street Railway Company.
Yeah, and this is the funny thing about Portland in terms of, their street railways. Street railways, their whole big thing was that they loved to be balkanized and fight wars against one another.
Yeah.
And that even happened here.
Oh, that happened here. In Portland, there were 15 at one point.
So they're laying down track and taking it up the next day.
They're fighting
15
each other.
times
Yeah,
harder.
yes, very much so.
Oh.
Good old-fashioned capitalism.
Capitalism be like.
Free market.
Yeah.
We should bring that back. I want
We should bring that
I
back.
want 14 competing streetcar companies in Salt Lake City.
I want people to compete to build bike lanes or extend the bike lane.
Like, our bike lane toll is 0.1 cent. Ours is 0.01 cents. I'm taking that bike lane instead.
Yeah. Jeez, that sounds so...
It does sound fun, right? Just like...
I mean, if that was possible, if it was legal to go paint your own bike lane, there would be so many groups and companies who would have already done that.
Okay, and here's an idea, a cursed idea I've just come up with inside my head. So, Twitter handles. You know how companies these days love to do, weird stuff on their Twitter and make, be, quirky?
Yep.
Yeah, imagine all the Twitter beef between the 14 separate street railway companies of Salt Lake City.
Oh, boy.
Just the Wasatch Front Traction and Power Company is so not POG, OMG. Posted by the South SaltAke and Murray Mill Creek Railway Company. It would be funny, it'd be funny.
That would be a universe to live in.
Yes, it would.
Oh my
The
God.
best possible timeline.
I concur.
So, horse and steam-powered streetcars continued to expand throughout the region and eventually crossed the Willamette River to
Through the
serve...
magic of bridges.
Through the magic of bridges. I believe that the company that did that was called the Willamette Bridge Railway Company.
Did not see that one coming.
I love the creative names here.
Yes. And then they were serving the, at the time, independent city of East Portland.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's
this was
South-
back in the day before they had enough bridges to merge them into one.
Yeah. Today, Portland's very much a city of bridges, but back then, not so much. Bridges were hard to build back then. The Willamette and Columbia are big, big rivers.
Yeah.
So...
They actually have water in them.
Shut up.
Jordan River shade thrown.
We build bigger bridges over railroad tracks than we do over rivers.
Oh man,
Yeah.
some of those bridges over the Jordan River there are just so ridiculously over-engineered for the size of that river. You could put that thing in a culvert.
Some of them are also just scary to cross.
That's true.
Connor, the bridge on the Jordan River Trail that goes over the freight tracks is way bigger and way more thoroughly engineered than any of the ones over the actual river.
This is true.
This is very true. And across the Great Salt Lake, we just put a big pile of dirt.
Well, I mean, it has tracks on it.
Well,
Oh yeah, the
big pile of dirt has tracks
Yeah,
on it.
the causeway.
Mhm.
Well, it's breached
Causeway
now, but,
bad.
And yeah.
We should probably replace it with a normal bridge, but that's
it
just me.
doesn't get used.
Well, it should. I mean, you got that flat of or straight of a thing. It's perfect for high-speed rail of some sort or
Yeah.
something. Just saying.
Yeah, but
Just get it up to 88 miles an hour and you're set.
88 miles an hour, that is not high-speed rail except in America.
I mean, it moves you through time quickly.
Oh, pfft. Ha ha, you're funny. Take you back to the streetcar days.
So that's why Frontrunner's limited to 79. They don't want to risk it getting close to 88.
isn't it 79.9?
I think it's just 79.
No, it's 79. We don't
Okay.
have the .9s on
Okay.
the speedometers. And it starts making this really annoying beeping noise when you get close to it because PTC is a thing.
Oh. Aren't you supposed to cruise at 79?
No, you're supposed to cruise at like 77.
Why?
I don't
Do
know.
the things not have
I am
control?
not. I don't know. Anyway, back on topic. So after all these like steam-powered and horse-powered streetcars were built out, the first electric streetcars in Portland were introduced in 1890, and they eventually, and relatively quickly actually, like this wasn't like, you know, oh, over the course of 20 years we're going to replace all of our horse cars with electric streetcars. No, it was
By
like
2050, we're going to have 2 electric streetcar lines installed.
yeah, it was like 3 years, and they electrified all the streetcar lines.
Dang.
Demand and 17 railways.
I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in terms of sort of electric, I guess what you would call the precursors to light rail, Portland actually a pioneer both in modern light rail and in olden days light rail, because the first electric interurban line in the United States opened in 1893, running between Portland proper and Oregon City, which is located about 16 miles to the south.
Wow.
So, you know, they did like the first interurban line and then like the third light rail line
Well,
in America.
Yeah.
So they're
Cool.
pioneers in rail transit, trademark.
And they even put in a cable car.
They did. There was actually a very short cable car system in Portland which ran along 5th Avenue.
I take it that's the steepest street.
I don't think so. I think it was just a normal street, and they just decided that they were going to use that instead of a normal
I mean,
streetcar.
like 15 streetcar companies and 1 cable car company seems like a good balance.
Yes. Unfortunately, they weren't very long for the world. They were put in 1890, the same year as the first electric streetcar, and surprise, surprise, were replaced by standard streetcars in 96. 1896, that is, not 1996.
Oh, could you imagine?
San Francisco be like. So, fortunately, they decided that maybe having 15 streetcar companies was not a good idea. And
Now that they had like built out a strong network and it was all electric.
yeah, so throughout this period, the various streetcar companies started to consolidate and eventually forming what would become the largest of them all, the Portland Railway Light and Power Company, which was founded in 1906.
I always love how the railways are also light and power.
Well, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Because as we're electrifying the country, you have to start running electricity down all these random streets. And so you might as well use that infrastructure investment to also make other money through the power of an electric streetcar.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the point being, if it was the year, like, 1890 something, I would be a streetcar tycoon.
Yes, you would.
I would
Yes, you
make so much money from streetcars.
Back in the day when one did not do urban planning, one just got digging.
Also around this time, and this is 1910 we're talking about now, Oregon became the first ever state to pay for roads with a gas tax. They were kind of the first to embrace automobiles, and it was because of this whole movement they had called the Good Roads Movement, understandably.
Yes.
Well named again.
Yes,
I would actually prefer the bad roads movement, where we make gravel roads that don't go anywhere.
What's wrong with good roads, Kyle? Don't you want the automobile to have easy access to your center city?
Then you don't want to walk anywhere
Yeah,
and
walking
get
bad.
hit by cars.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sort of as a result of this, streetcars increasingly came into conflict with private automobiles.
Because they were both on the street.
Yeah.
Who was
At the
there first, though?
At the same time.
Who was there
Hey, who was
first?
there first?
Hey,
Yeah.
hey.
Yeah, the streetcar was there
Streetcar
first.
shot first.
I say seniority.
RETVRN, return.
Yeah.
Seniority. Yeah, seniority rules.
Hey.
And unfortunately, cutbacks started to occur, with various operating companies becoming increasingly financially unstable due to competition with cars.
And this doesn't mean like competition with cars on like travel time and cost. This means like physical competition on the actual street between vehicles.
Yeah, like there would be streetcars like ding, 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 and there's this car just sitting there going like 4 miles an hour because it's 1918.
And it goes, awooga!
Awooga! Ding, 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 ding. Woo.
So understandably, the cars being the maneuverable smog-producing machines they are, were able to outfight the streetcars that were not able to move around the cars.
I mean, in a fair fight, like running head-on, the streetcar is going to win, but it's not a fair fight because the car isn't on tracks. So...
Yeah, and they're not supposed to ram into the car.
Tell that to the S-Line. It's like 4 cars in the last month.
It's a recurring problem.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So streetcar ridership nationwide would peak in 1923 with 14.8 billion annual trips.
Whew.
And around this time in Portland, there were like 70 million annual trips on the streetcar network. Comes pretty close to rivaling pre-pandemic TriMet. So
nice.
Think about that. And there may be like 500, 600,000 people in the metro area then versus now where there's 2.5 million. So
all right.
Big impressive. Much wow. Unfortunately, though, because cars, once again, ridership continued on a downward spiral from this point, declining until the beginning of World War II. And increasingly around this time, streetcar and interurban lines were being replaced with trolleybuses and regular buses.
Which are more compatible with car-oriented infrastructure.
That they are. Portland actually had a pretty substantial trolleybus network on the east side during this period. But of course that was all torn out. So,
of course.
Yeah, there are no trolleybuses in Portland today.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
We should bring them back.
They should be on the 2 Division is what they should be on. That's going to be the FX, the 2 Division FX pretty soon. But anyway.
Who names these
we'll
things?
get into that later. Well, you see in a lot of cities, unlike here, like you don't just have like bus route 2, you have 2 Division. You have like the street name or a destination name. Like in San Francisco, for example, streetcar lines aren't just called the J line, it's the J Church or the N Judah. So that's actually pretty common. But
interesting.
I like our names.
Well, I guess
honest.
ours only makes sense because of our
we
really
don't have
strong grid
street
system.
names.
Oh yeah, that is true.
Most fun fact, most places don't only name their streets numbers.
That's
Salt Lake
weird.
City. So
And Grand Junction. Though.
I mean, and we kind of do that though. Like if you look on UTA like material, it's the 200 South or whatever is often a thing. So we kind of do that, but it doesn't make as much sense because our roads don't have names.
So we just incorporate the road number into the bus number.
Yeah.
I think it's effective. I like
it works
Yeah.
fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either way, but I just that's an interesting little difference between UTA buses and a lot of other
The
places.
3 should be called the -3.
The 3 isn't going to exist in a week, so
Unfortunately.
sadly, the
they should
3,
have kept
the 3
it
is
raised
one they should have
frequency
kept.
and renamed it to the -3.
Or you could just keep it the 3, because there's never going to be a bus on 3rd South.
No, there's not. I've seen a bus try to turn onto 3rd South with all the parked cars. It's
too
really hard to
road-guided,
maneuver.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's all the new medians there too.
Well, it
Yeah.
would be a non-issue if it wasn't a parking lot, but it is a parking lot. So.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Fortunately, because parked cars slow down moving cars.
This is true.
I know.
So, World War II would provide a temporary reprieve for transit in Portland and indeed the entire country.
Because we needed all the materials for the war.
Yeah, and funnily enough, transit ridership actually reached its all-time peak there, to this day, in 1944.
Well, and people were actually willing to give stuff up.
I know, and gotta fight them darned fascists in Europe and or Japan. So, can't be driving. If you drive alone, you drive with Hitler, is the slogan they used.
Because they need all the rubber and the gas and whatever.
And steel. And
Tanks take a lot more gasoline than cars, and we had a lot of tanks. So, and airplanes.
Yeah.
So, get this, kids. If you drive alone, you drive with Putin.
Russian oil be like.
Russian oil do be like. So, in 1943, which is just before that, well-known jerk Robert Moses was brought in to determine the future urban form of Portland. Needless to say, freeway expansion was coming. I like that, well-known jerk. I was going to say something meaner, but I figured I should probably keep it PG.
I honestly think that's mean enough. I think that gets the point across better than any other word you could have said.
The fact that he is well-known for being just a complete piece of garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a fact. We have had much time to study this.
Yes.
Well, if I got called a well-known jerk, I'd be devastated.
Yeah.
Robert Moses spinning his grave and generating
He's
green
like,
electricity.
I'm not a well-known jerk. Don't call me that.
Part 3. Portland gets paved. The post-war period.
This is indeed true. Also, if you would like to learn more about the exploits of Robert Moses, you should A, listen to episode 1 of the Red Line podcast entitled How the Car Destroyed America / the American City, and also, well, there's your problem podcast's episode 108, The Westside Elevated Highway. Both of those things showcase the beautiful handiwork of Robert Moses.
Yes. Bask in the glory of the urban freeway. City.
So, as Kyle hath said, in the post-war period, freeway expansion would really reign supreme in Portland, and there was basically nonstop construction of freeways between 1958 and 1983.
Freeways obviously being the future and getting that glorious 9-to-1 federal match on state spending.
Yes, indeed.
9-to-1?
9-to-1.
Yes.
Yeah,
9
that's
to 1.
that's what Eisenhower did. Yeah.
State government, $1. Eisenhower, $9.
Whoa.
With very little input from the local areas, so the state just got paving on free money.
Could you imagine if Eisenhower did not go on the cross-country trip?
Yeah, right.
I know, right?
He should simply have stayed home. Is my take on Eisenhower.
Well, undeniably, the rural interstates are good.
Oh,
They're
there's
useful.
nothing wrong with the interstate.
Yeah, the rural
interstates.
The interstate interstates, the rural ones are great. It's when you start plowing them through urbanized areas that everything
For
goes to
example,
dark garbage.
Yeah. Go on Google Maps and just look at Portland. There is much freeway. Even in downtown, there is just this ring of freeway surrounding the entire downtown. The waterfront on the Willamette River from downtown Portland used to have a freeway on it. Doesn't anymore, but the other side still does.
So they actually did a real-life freeway removal?
Yeah, it was a little less involved than normal freeway removals because it was more are you familiar with JFK Drive in New York?
No.
Okay, well, for those of you who are familiar, it was more like that than traditional urban freeway, kind of like a really big surface highway.
Yeah. So what about for those of us unfamiliar?
It's a really big surface highway.
Oh wait, so
it
the
used to be the
okay.
whole width
On
of
the-
that.
So it was
on the west side.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it used to be this whole thing, and it would go all the way up Nieto.
And now they've got this really wide linear park and also just a surface parkway for cars.
Wait, so
Well,
just
not
the
actually,
park,
not
or-
really a parkway for cars. It's actually kind of a bike parkway if you look closely at it.
Oh, they have that right next to
There's real big bike lanes.
whoa.
Oh,
Actually
whoa.
room for two-way traffic?
Yeah,
That's
but if you look on the other side of the
actually
Willamette,
nice.
freeway
Yes,
I-5.
Nico's car.
and much spaghetti.
Because there are so many legitimate reasons to bring this into city center.
Yes, of course.
And they've got the whole ring going around, obviously, and then it goes out in all 7 directions.
Yeah,
Wow.
and actually the same year that the freeway construction proper started, the last streetcars ran, and so buses be gone. But there was a Save Our Streetcars movement that was unsuccessful.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
Not much you can do against a 9-to-1 federal match.
Yeah, really, there's no way to compete. So
9-to-1 federal match on transit spending.
be yeah. So Robert Moses' vision of what Portland should look like, which is many freeways, was kind of realized, to be honest with you. There are a lot of freeways, but there is one freeway that was never built, and that is the Mount Hood Freeway. And do you know why the Mount Hood Freeway was not built?
Why was the Mount Hood Freeway not built, Connor?
Because everyone was mad about it and nobody wanted it. And so the city actually listened, and instead of plowing a massive freeway through people's houses and communities and streets and churches and other assorted objects, they did not do that.
Good.
That's crazy. They actually listened.
For one time out of hundreds.
Well, and this may have been influenced by the fact that, let's, again, think back to the geography of Portland. There is only one east-west freeway connection through the mountains. So traffic congestion, despite all this massive construction of freeways all over the place, bad. It's always been bad. It's always going to be bad. And it wasn't getting any better despite the fact that they're spending bazillions and gazillions of dollars on new freeways all the time. Surprisingly, I know.
Yeah, I'm shocked.
It's shocking. Absolutely aghast. This sort of is le naissance, or the renaissance, I guess you would say, of sort of transit-oriented thinking in Portland. Because all these civic leaders are seeing, like, oh, everybody's mad because we don't want to build this new Mount Hood freeway, which is nowhere near Mount Hood or anything. Robert Moses just called it that because reasons.
He's a genius and did everything right.
He was a genius of science, yes.
Yes.
But yeah, all these civic leaders and stuff are like, oh crap, everyone's real mad about these freeways and we still have this terrible congestion all the time and this and that and it's costing us a lot of money. And so everyone's like, well, there's gotta be a better way.
Really? I wonder what that could be.
It can't be public transit, can it?
No. Couldn't be that. So yeah, it kind of paved the way for the mindset of a lot of civic leaders.
Get it? Paved the way?
Yeah, I know. Funny, right?
Ha.
For civic leaders and regional leaders to have the mindset they have today, which is kind of a very urbanist, very transit-oriented mindset in general. Like, even in the suburbs of Portland, there is a much more, I guess you would just say, urbanist mindset than there is in your average suburb, on the part of leadership, at least.
Because they got this in with, like, the early opposition to freeways?
Yeah.
As opposed
well, it's not that it was an early opposition to freeways. It was the same time as everybody else. It's just that they were succeeded.
As opposed
which
to
is uncommon.
As opposed to, say, Salt Lake Valley, for example, everywhere else, where such opposition has long since fizzled out.
We just ate up the freeways.
Yeah.
We were like, nom.
This is for a future part of the episode, but, like, this movement that killed the Mount Hood Freeway and got the, whatever the one that was along the Willamette on the downtown side was called, got that removed, got the Mount Hood Freeway killed, is still around.
Good.
And it's still fighting, actually, because they're doing an expansion on the I-5 bridge across the Columbia. So, that, like...
Because that would unilaterally solve all congestion.
Obviously.
Every problem.
We've only done it like 14 times.
This is like UDOT's latest projects where they spend circa $350 million adding one additional lane in one direction to one part of I-15.
Yeah.
Not I-80.
I-15.
Oh, they're expanding I-80 too.
Yeah.
Great.
And building a new freeway in Davis County.
Yes!
And a new freeway in Salt Lake County. It's great.
You know, of all state highway departments, I've got to say, UDOT is relatively good at paving their way out of congestion.
Well, that's just because they did it because there's like one freeway lane mile per person.
Precisely. Like, a lot of other areas have, like, geographic constraints.
Well, so do we. Point of the Mountain and whatever the north thing is called.
I mean, we do have those, but within, like, the downtown area and the main valley, we don't, like, at all.
Well, the main reason that it's worked thus far is because they pave so quickly that population growth has not yet had the chance to catch up.
Right? Like, normally, the state highway department outpaces population growth by, like, a little bit, a few tens of % margin, and then congestion goes up anyways. But UDOT
go burr.
$2 billion a year budget go burr.
Yeah, so there is like, what, $2,000 per person in Salt Lake County?
Wait, doesn't that mean public transit could technically have the $2 billion?
Yes.
And we could have...
This is just like UDOT's budget that they spend.
That's their capital
pretty
budget.
much entirely just building things.
But now they could just build rail because they're in charge of it.
No, they can't.
Well, they could.
Well, in 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. Well, they could, or they could spend hundreds of millions of dollars on projects that add, like, tens of % more capacity to existing freeways.
Yes!
Yes!
Which obviously unilaterally solves congestion.
Let's go!
This is actually a freeway podcast.
This is a freeway. This is a pro-freeway podcast.
We've been keeping it undercover for 14 episodes.
Yes.
We've been laughing behind the scenes.
About how much we hate public transportation.
Man, I can't wait.
This is going to get us canceled.
I can't wait for, like, the Costco I go to get paved over in the name of efficient transportation.
That's not the Costco you're going to. That's the other Costco.
If we're going to keep up with this pace, they'll pave over this one.
The largest Costco in the world?
Yeah.
In Salt Lake City. Fun fact.
Once we have the 17th South Freeway to complement the 13th South Freeway.
Wait, are we having a 17th South Freeway?
And the expansion of the 24th South Freeway east parallel to I-80.
Yeah.
13th East Freeway.
Well, no, we already have that. It's called 7th East.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back on topic. Wow, we are very tangenty today, aren't we?
This is the point of the podcast.
Content be like.
Anyways, Freeway bad.
Yeah, Freeway bad, and yeah, Portland has a very developed anti-freeway movement.
Good.
Anywho's'll be. By the twilight days of the era of freeway expansion, so we're talking about late 70s at this point, Rose City Lines, which was sort of the main company that had taken over the remains of the transit thing.
It's cool that they had a company that survived all the way through the entire thing.
Yes, it was like from the death of the streetcars to the death of privately owned public transit was Rose City Lines. And so they're barely surviving at this point, right? Like they've dropped to like 10 million riders a year, which is not a zilch, nothing at all. And they're like almost bankrupt. They're talking about doing a big old fare hike or just stopping.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so the city of Portland created, and this is a mouthful because it's a government agency, the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, which is more commonly known, very sensibly if you ask me, as TriMet.
In 1969.
It was the fall of 69. It was October, actually.
that is in fall.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
So it was the fall of 69. It was 2 months between the creation of the agency and when Rose City Lines was like, here you go, and just gave everything they had to TriMet.
Reasonable, because they have no money.
Because they had no money. So they're just like, crap. We gotta operate service. So there was a short strike. There was some other drama over their thing. But then they got things up and running, and they started buying out some other, regional service providers, mostly like commuter service providers that they were buying out, and improving service, actually. And
whoa, is that legal?
No.
Oh.
It is simply not legal.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
UTA's August change day.
Yeah, actually just destroying service for most people. Anywho.
Wow.
Moving on. We'll talk about that later.
We will talk about that later.
Yes.
After reading all those public comments, I'm increasingly salty and less optimistic.
Especially about the 3 and the 6.
And the 209.
Yeah, that's unfortunate as well. But that's a little less bad than other things because people are assuming they can't just take a transfer to the 2.
Well, you can, but it's objectively worse than your bus just turning.
Sure, but not that much worse.
But there's no reason it should be worse.
You can also transfer to the 1.
That is true.
The 1.
And the 4, and the red line, and eventually the orange line. I think people are making a mountain out of the molehill on that one in particular. But on the 3 and the 3, the 6, the 519, the 520 should probably be staying around, in my opinion. Anyway.
Imagine if they added new routes and improved service while also keeping the old routes.
What a concept. What a concept.
They could have added the 1 and also kept the 519 and the 520.
They could have done that.
That would have actually been great for everybody involved.
No. Bad. Terrible.
I've been owned.
My name is the Utah Transit Authority Board of Supervisors.
And I love neglecting all of my riders.
Everything.
Even University of Utah commuters who have been traditionally pampered.
Fast buses be gone.
The 6 be gone?
The 6 do be gone, and the 3. Anyway, on topic.
Wrong city.
TriMet continued to improve service throughout the next decade, implementing route numbers.
Wow.
Whoa.
Like, this was a new thing for them. Like, previously it wasn't the 2 division, it was just division. It was the Division Street bus, or whatever. So this was a big deal.
Okay.
Bus shelters.
High tech.
I know, high tech, new things. They got a new board structure. They implemented a fareless square in downtown Portland.
Good.
Nice.
Which does not exist anymore because to save money in like the 90s or something, they cut it.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was good while it lasted. And then in 1977, the Downtown Transit Mall, which now carries the orange and yellow line MAX trains and the green line, was invented and created, and it became a thing. And it was a couple of mono-directional streets just for buses. It was very nice. It was sort of part of the project that downtown Portland was doing at the time to like de-parking lotify itself.
They did that in the 70s?
The main reason that Portland is sort of the urbanist mecca of North America
is they've been doing
is that
it
started
the 70s.
Doing the things that everyone is trying to do now 20 years earlier than everyone else started trying to do them.
That is true. And really good.
Yeah.
Like really good.
Good for them.
Yeah. So that's why downtown Portland's so cool. Like, if you're driving through, like, for any reason, go park at a Max stop for a couple hours and just go walk around, because it's really, really just a pleasant place to be, even with some of the issues that it has at the moment. Anyway, there were some troubles in the late 70s and early 80s, money and stuff, because they use a payroll tax instead of a sales tax.
Strange.
Okay.
Because they are liberal.
Oh, because
sales tax is regressive.
Mm-hmm. Payroll tax opposite of regressive.
Payroll tax is not regressive.
Makes sense.
When there were a couple, there was a recession in the early 80s, and so they had to cut service, and recessions impact payroll taxes a lot more than they impact sales taxes because unemployment. So anyway, that's a whole thing. But they got over that, and it was about to be TriMet's time to really shine, like, on a world and on a national stage, because the MAX was here to come. And they did a much better job of coming up with an acronym than we did, if you ask me. Like, that sounds cooler.
Maximum train.
Like, MAX. So after nearly, like, a decade of planning and, like, I don't know, like 30 years of people being like, hey, maybe we should do a train.
They did a train. 20 years earlier than everybody else.
Actually, they are the third North American light rail system, I think. San Diego beat them out.
Right.
And Calgary, if I'm not mistaken, don't take my word for that, people, but it was at least 2 cities beat them out. But they were one of the first.
Very early.
Very early adopter of light rail, yes. And probably the most prolific adopter to this day.
Yeah.
So, they get credit for that. Fun fact about the Metropolitan Area Express, as it is officially titled, which is, like, really a good just acronym in general. Like, it gets what it's meant to say. Like, it is the Metropolitan Area of Portland Express.
Yeah, and it's a thing you can say.
Versus, like, or like, TRAX stands for Transit something Express or something.
It's just a dumb wordplay.
Yeah, it's not as good. But anyway, I like Max better than TRAX or DART or whatever else you want. BART. Well, BART. I think I gotta say I like BART better than Max, but that's just because it's a proper metro instead of a.
Well, and it's the Bay Area.
And it is the Bay Area. Bay Area Rapid Transit.
All the stuff Portland's building, Max is rapidly turning into a metro.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Yeah, so in 1986, the MAX opened, running from Gresham, which is the, like, furthest east suburb of Portland, to downtown. And it was an immediate success. Like, smash, crash, ridership projections, more like weak and dumb, because it smashed those suckers. Let me see if I can find the numbers for that. I know I have them here.
Somewhere in the internet.
I do.
Drink water. Water brig.
Cheers.
Let's see.
I can talk for hours now.
Really? Nothing? We'll skip that. But it exceeded, like, pretty much every other light rail line at the time, its ridership expectations by a relatively significant margin. And it was popular enough that, other suburbs of Portland started being like, hey, we want our own MAX. And so
then they got it.
They did get it. After about another decade of planning, communities on the west side of the Willamette River, so to the west of downtown Portland, passed a ballot measure to pay for the construction of what at the time was called the Westside MAX, very creatively.
Very.
In 1990, and it was completed in 1998. Running from downtown Portland to Hillsborough, which is, the second furthest west suburb of Portland.
Nice. Portland being all cool and stuff with their ballot measures.
Yeah, and so this completed the current 33-mile alignment of the Blue Line.
Nice.
Which is quite long.
33 miles.
For a light rail line. It's quite long.
This is America. Everything is a really long
Texas
light rail line.
and, like, Los Angeles has longer light rail lines. Oh, and Seattle's going to have, like, a 60-mile light rail line in the near future.
Good.
But
the link.
That's bad. It should be
linking the link.
I love
the link.
I love the link.
Yeah.
Reasonable.
So, yeah, it's 33 miles long. Takes about an hour 40 minutes to get across the whole thing, mostly because of downtown. It should be closer to an hour and 10 minutes when they get done with the project that we will be talking about.
The project.
I have a feeling it's similar to what they did in Seattle.
Hey,
it is.
It's just foreshadowing.
Well, I don't know for sure. That's speculation on my part.
Speculation. So, yes, soon after this, the airport and interstate Maxes. Maxi? Well, anyway, the airport Max and the interstate Max were soon to follow. They were trying to take what is now the Yellow Line and was called the Interstate Max at the time to Vancouver, Washington, because, there do be commuters coming across the Columbia River.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But then Vancouver being somewhat more conservative than Portland and its surrounding suburbs, they rejected the ballot measure to pay for their part of the funding for that.
Rude.
So it now terminates at Portland Expo Center just on the south side of the Columbia River and is still prime for expansion north, which is
eventually
another thing we're going to be talking about because that is becoming a thing, probably. And then also the Airport Max. So the Airport Max is now the Red Line, and that was open to the airport, unsurprisingly.
Really?
In 2000. I know. Alex has ridden the Airport Max.
I've ridden it twice.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was open in 2001, at the same time as our Red Line, actually, coincidentally, was first opened, the University Line. And then the Interstate Max, which is now the Yellow Line, which runs along Interstate Avenue and not the interstate, funnily enough.
Honestly, good improvement.
I was going to say,
Freeway alignments suck.
Airport Max ran along the freeway.
The airport Max runs along the freeway. The Interstate
Okay.
Max runs along Interstate Avenue, which is a few blocks from a different freeway.
Wow.
So
Okay,
Just
cool.
to make it simple.
Just to make it confusing. Yes. And then also opening around the same time was the original stretch of the Portland Streetcar.
Ooh.
Yes.
So the aughts was a big time for rail transit in Portland, let's just say that. And it ran from Portland State to downtown and
Nice.
is very pog and was very pog.
And it
I love
continues
a
to be very
good
powerful.
streetcar.
We do love a good streetcar and one of the few good streetcars. So a flurry of further expansions followed in the aughts and teens, with the Green Line opening in 2009, the Orange Line in 2015, and the streetcar being continuously expanded during that time. It's a big boy. Oh, and then also they did a commuter rail.
Already?
Also in 2009. It's not very good, but it does connect Tualatin and other more southerly communities to Beaverton Transit Center, where you do a linear transfer to the Max Red or Blue Line.
Well, at least they have good Amtrak.
They do have good Amtrak service.
Good on them.
Very true.
Don't they have an actual Amtrak station?
They do.
I'm gonna
Portland
include my pictures from my trip to
Portland Union
Good
Station
idea.
Yeah, I love that
is
station.
very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, and then since, TriMet does not operate in Clark County, which is the Washington part, the Vancouver part of the metropolitan area, it should also be noted that CTran, which is what the Clark County Transit Authority is called, has also done things there.
Great.
They have a sort of BRT line called the Vine,
Whoa.
because
Okay.
federal funding requirements for BRT require that you call it something weird. And that was opened in 2017. So that's the latest sort of, quote, rapid, unquote, transit in Portland. It also does not go across the river.
Wow.
There is still no high-capacity transit across the Columbia River.
Rude.
Thank you, Vancouver, Washington. You could have had this 20 years ago.
Rude.
But anywho, commuter buses are sort of more of a thing in Portland than they can be in other places because geography. So those are also a big deal that you should be aware of.
Okay.
Cool.
But yes, that sort of gets us to
Part 4 or 5 or whatever.
Transit in Portland today.
First off, the good.
Good things.
Yeah, there's 44 miles of high-quality light rail with good ridership per mile.
This is true. Okay, and let's I want to nerd out over the Max for a little bit because it is very much a light rail system. Let's start with the Yellow Line because that's the easiest one, right? So it's pretty short. It's about 5-6 miles and it runs along Interstate Avenue from the Portland Expo Center, which is on the banks of the Columbia River, to downtown Portland via the Transit Mall. And that one almost exclusively in a street alignment.
Okay.
Very much a tram line. And what's weird about the orange and yellow lines in Portland is that they through run into each other. So if you are on a northbound orange line train into downtown, when it gets out of downtown to the north, it becomes a yellow line MAX train.
So it's basically just one long line?
That is correct. There are actually only 4 MAX lines.
That seems kind of confusing, but cool.
I mean, it's all branding. It doesn't matter too much.
If it takes you where you need to go, I guess.
Yes.
Neat. So I guess that leads us into the orange line?
Yes, the orange line is the other type of light rail line that you get in Portland and is almost exclusively not in a road alignment, except downtown.
All right.
And it crosses over Portland's grand centerpiece of their newest transit expansion bridge, Tillicum Crossing, which it shares with the A-loop and B-loop of the Portland streetcar.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah, so it runs from downtown to Milwaukee Town Center, which is a dead mall. So
Okay.
there you go.
Okay.
And it's eventually going to go to Oregon City, which is the furthest south suburb of Portland.
Cool.
Surprisingly. I know.
Who names these things?
What do you mean?
Oregon City.
What? The guy who lived there.
Portland.
Mr. Oregon City.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mr. Oregon City named it. So that brings us to the Green Line, which is kind of wacky in its own right. Because all the MAX lines are kind of unique in their own little ways. So the Green Line probably has the most freeway alignment of any MAX line.
Is this the one that goes to the airport?
It is not.
Red line.
So it runs from Sunnyside, which is a southeast suburb of Portland, up to what's the interchange station? It's a big, important interchange station. It is called the Gateway Northeast 99th Avenue Transit Center MAX Station. And that's where the blue line and the red line meet. And it runs along, let's see, what freeway is this? There's too many freeways for me to count, people.
Gross.
The War Veterans Memorial Freeway.
Not to be confused with the regular Veterans Memorial Highway, which is in Utah.
Yes, that's right. Or the Veterans Memorial Parkway, which is in Boise. And is a freeway, effectively. So it's... yeah.
And Portland's freeway alignments, don't they run next to the freeway instead of in the median?
They do. They run next to the freeway.
See, that seems a lot better to me for local transit, because then you're not stuck in the middle of the freeway.
I agree completely.
That's probably the worst place to be stuck in the history of all time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless you're on a high-speed train, in which case it's marginally
or a regional
all right.
train even.
Yeah.
Commuter trains are fine in freeways.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. So then it sort of joins the red line and the blue line to run along I-84 until they hit, just this random street in Portland. It's called Holiday Street, which it runs along until it hits the Steel Bridge, which is the place where all the MAX lines pass over the Willamette River in the north. All of them.
Is that where the Amtrak passes too?
Yeah, Amtrak passes just to the north of that.
Okay.
So you can see it sort of right there. There's the Steel Bridge. There's Portland Union.
I think I have some footage of that bridge.
Put it in there if you have it so that we can see it. And then it terminates on the transit mall. So it doesn't through run with anything. It just stops on the transit mall.
Cool.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then we get to the red line, which is kind of the least its own line of any of the lines because it has 3 stations from the airport to the Gateway Transit Center where it meets with the green and blue lines, and then it just runs along with the blue line until Beaverton.
So it's pretty much just because airport.
It's very much like a spur line that through runs onto the western half of the blue line.
Well.
Kind of a branch of the blue line, actually.
But why would we do branches when we could have so many colors?
Right. And then there is the king of them all, the vast majority of Portland's transit and kind of the regional connector of the whole thing, the blue line, which goes Hillsborough, Beaverton, Portland, Gresham. And so on the Westside MAX, the part from Hillsborough to Beaverton Transit Center is like a traditional railway alignment like we have here in Salt Lake City. Then it follows the freeway into downtown Portland, where it runs in its own different transit mall because there are 3 different transit malls in downtown Portland. And then it gets onto the I-84 alignment with the blue and green lines after crossing the Steel Bridge.
Okay.
And then runs in the street into Gresham.
Okay.
It's a lot of line.
There is a lot to it, and it's very long. It serves many people.
I like that map.
It is nice, right? Except it's the Google Maps. So, So, and then there's the streetcar, which has the A-loop, the B-loop, and the C-loop. The A-loop and the B-loop kind of follow each other and create sort of a loop through downtown Portland and through East Portland and to the Lloyd District and all that. And then the C loop, it goes up to northwest Portland.
Nice.
Yeah. So that is the rail transit of Portland.
Wow.
There is much.
Many rail, much transit.
And what's sort of unique among light rail systems in the United States about Portland's MAX is that it kind of goes everywhere.
Yeah, that's quite unusual, actually.
That's kind of the goal, isn't it?
Like, it's pretty hard to be somewhere in the Portland metropolitan area and not be within, except in the southwest, where there was supposed to be a new light rail line, but that's been put on hold. Anyway, except in the southwest, it's kind of hard to be in the Portland metropolitan area and not be within short driving or walking or biking distance of a MAX line.
That's kind of the whole point, isn't it?
That is quite an accomplishment.
Unique among light rail systems in North America.
Is that more because of their geography or more of just how aggressively they built out?
Yes.
Or both?
The answer to that is yes. And also the urban growth boundary sort of makes it so that all the development is occurring in proximity to these things.
Really?
Yeah.
Urban growth boundaries and infill development are good things for the growth and development of a metropolitan area?
Yeah, weird, right?
Did not see that one coming.
Yeah. So pre-pandemic, the MAX attracted about 120,000 riders a day.
Cool.
By itself.
Nice.
Which is, almost a UTA. TriMet as a whole did about 360,000 riders a day, not including C-Tran, not including Smart Transit, which is in the south, and not including the Streetcar. So probably about 400,000 transit trips daily in Portland pre-pandemic, which is a lot.
Those are like serious numbers.
Those are good numbers.
Those are serious numbers.
Still only a 12% mode share, but that's a lot better than most places in North America.
That's significantly better than
For a metropolitan area of its size, Portland,
which is growing a new transit system.
Portland is unmatched in terms of mode share for both biking and transit.
12%, man.
12% transit mode share.
That's legitimately impressive.
10% carpool mode share, about 15% biking mode share, and 8% walking mode share. So they only had about 56% driving alone mode share in Portland pre-pandemic, which is incredibly impressive for a new transit system.
Wow.
That is really impressive, and it's only getting better.
Yes. So, good things, as we discussed. 44 miles of high-quality light rail with good ridership and relatively fast except downtown.
Yeah, well, that's normal.
Yes, and we'll talk about that. So, the other good thing is the FX, also known as the 2 division, and soon to be the 2 division, parenthesis, FX, close parentheses.
Great. The more things we can tack on that name, the better.
It is an improved bus service project on Division Street that brings high-quality stops, high-frequency buses, and good wayfinding to enhance service along one of the busiest transit corridors in the region.
How high frequency?
I believe 10 minutes, which is not bad.
Yeah,
cool.
Sweet.
It is not a BRT project, even though let's put it this way. Portland and TriMet applied for the grant to build the FX under BRT,
but they're building.
But it is not a BRT project, and they don't call it a BRT project
because that's a bus corridor.
They call
project.
it the Transit Improvement Project, the Division Street Transit Improvement Project. And they would probably have continued to call it the 2 division, the bus that runs along it, if they didn't get federal funding that requires them to rebrand it once it's a BRT line.
Yeah.
So, very good project. Very capital cost, good usage-wise.
Taking an existing bus corridor that's already well used and well loved and established.
Right, and it's also sort of a relief line for the Blue Line because, and we'll talk about this in the problem section, but unlike most American light rail systems, the MAX is constrained by capacity rather than demand.
Which is very strange.
Which is very strange for an American light rail system, yes.
Is this because bridge?
We will get into this.
Okay. I won't foreshadow too hard.
Yeah, and this is somewhat analogous to what they're doing on
Second South.
On Second South,
in the great state of Utah.
So the 2 will continue to run along it. Anyway, yeah. Also funny that both buses are, the 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird, right?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
We should rebrand our 2 the 2 division.
No, we should not do that.
We should officially name Second South
Division Street, so we can have our own 2 division.
Yes.
Are we going to rename Daybreak Parkway Church Street so we can have the J Church?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Just checking.
Are we just going to become Portland?
We're
We're
gonna try, but instead of rivers, we're gonna have urban freeways.
Oof. Pain.
Which we already do.
Pain.
So.
Also, good thing about transit in Portland, there is very good bus service in Portland proper.
Wow.
Sweet.
In Portland proper. I am not going to compliment TriMet's suburban bus service because it does not deserve compliments. Fair enough?
Yep.
Yep.
Also,
I got the point.
the streetcar, which is probably one of like 3 good modern streetcars.
Wow.
And it carried...
Because it's a real streetcar that runs on an actual
and
street.
it goes places.
It goes places. That'd do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, before the pandemic, it carried 15,000 people a day.
So it's Portland streetcar, the S line, and what else?
The S line is not one of the good ones.
I know,
No,
I'm kidding.
The Kansas City streetcar and the Cincinnati Bell Connector are ones that I would put in the good streetcar category.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because Kansas City is actually very good. Probably better than Portland. But anyway.
Good being code for useful.
Yes. Why the Portland streetcar is so good and so successful is that it enhances the reach of MAX downtown and in downtown adjacent areas. It sort of hooks up the MAX light rail, the regional transit, to all the dense areas, all the densest and most important areas of downtown. And adjacent areas, yes, don't get mad at me, East Side and Lloyd District. Don't get mad at me.
So you can actually feasibly and comfortably use transit to move around downtown and downtown adjacent areas.
That is right.
Wow.
Cries in Utah.
Cries in Utah, yeah. Yeah, right. Even our buses downtown kind of suck.
They suck.
They suck very bad because they all go on the same road and they go in the same direction as the trains. It's not great.
No,
we could use a network redesign downtown.
Yeah, we pretty much have a commuter system feeding into downtown.
Yes.
What we could use is a streetcar.
No. We could not use that. We could use is the Orange Line plan.
Okay,
but
build
anyway,
the Orange Line and then run a square.
A circulator service?
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that. You'll have the excess capacity for it at that point. So
Great.
Anyway, continuing on, since we're getting into like an hour mark at this point, what sort of impresses me the most about transit and urban planning and urbanism in Portland is that there's kind of always this will to do better by almost everyone involved. Like, the city is actively trying to improve non-car transportation opt-ins. TriMet is a really great agency that seems to really care a lot about its passengers and its people and all those involved. I mean, Metro is just an incredible, that's the regional government. They have all these brilliant plans for the future and what they want to do, and they're actively working on making the suburbs actually do their part in doing transit-oriented development. So there's a really big will to do good.
Which is really cool and really rare.
In the U.S. in general.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very hard to find a city where there seems to be this much agreement between the center city, the suburbs, the regional planners, the transit agency, and the state government, and they all want the same things.
That's crazy. So we're actually going to get the things. Or not us, but Portland.
Well, I mean, as I've discussed, I kind of want to go there for grad school, but, anyway. So, yes, general will to do better, very impressive. Now, all of these good things and the praise we can heap on Portland for having extensive and good transit and all this crap, they have some serious challenges that they're facing at the moment.
Turns out trains aren't entirely magic, just mostly magic.
Yeah. Challenge number 1, and this is a challenge that everybody has, ridership because of the pandemic. It has tanked, and it is recovering more slowly than other places because of problem number 2. TriMet is facing a truly crippling operator shortage. They are literally short 300 bus drivers right now. 300.
Holy hell.
They run 100 bus routes. So
that's a lot.
That is a lot of shortage, and they're trying to resolve it, but that's a big thing. So they've been canceling trips left and right. They've had to slash frequency on a bunch of routes. They're even missing departures and stuff that are still scheduled. It's not a good situation.
So that might slightly contribute to the lower ridership numbers when the service isn't there.
Now, it's still recovering.
So how did it get that bad?
A variety of factors. And this is a lot of it is safety for operators at the moment, which is unfortunately an issue in Portland because, once again, we do have this issue with unhoused people. And although I will certainly agree with everyone that mental health and drugs are not the cause of homelessness, there is a correlation there, because when you are desperate and living out on the streets, it is very easy to A, become mentally ill, or B, develop an addiction to substances. And so a lot of these unhoused people are causing safety issues for TriMet operators, especially bus operators.
Which, unsurprisingly, not great for hiring.
Right. Like, I am not an operator, but I am essentially an operator in that I have to deal with the public all the time. And I can personally attest to the fact that it is probably less safe to be a transit operator right now than it has been for a long time, because people are under a lot of stress from pandemic, from recession, from the war, from this, from that, from everything in between. And because there is a housing crisis, so there are a lot more unhoused people, which compounds that. Like, I guess I'm allowed to disclose this, I have been assaulted twice on the job, and I have been working at UTA for 6 months.
Not great.
Yeah,
no.
Not good at all.
So that is probably the main contributing factor. Also, transit agencies don't pay as well as they should most places, and that's another factor. Although they have resolved that issue in Portland, where starting pay for a bus operator is now $26.
That's above UTA's top pay.
Wait, $26?
$26
an hour.
I know.
Nice.
I know.
Jeez.
Like, I'm thinking, wow, if I have to drop out of college, I'm moving to Gresham and becoming a bus driver.
Bus driver being a prestigious and well-paying job now.
As it should be.
I mean, it always has been.
Yes. So, yeah. And they do appear to be fixing it, because they reportedly have 100 to 200 people in training to be bus drivers at the moment.
Okay, that's like half.
So they're working on it.
Well, that's
Sweet.
good progress.
Yeah.
Well, what are immediate issues facing the system?
Well, those are them. The pandemic and the operator shortage.
Yeah.
There isn't really a big funding issue like there was here, because
Portland.
sales tax is affected differently than payroll tax. So their revenue has remained relatively constant while ours has decreased, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's my bad. I read this as the, and I know you speak French, so I thought it was Lee immediate issues.
Lay immediate issues. Yeah.
Well, moving on to said less immediate issues.
Yes. So
the Steel Bridge.
The Steel Bridge. So the Steel Bridge, all 4 MAX lines run over it to get to the east side. And this is causing a capacity issue, because the thing with Portland's trains, right, they have really small blocks. They have 212-foot blocks in Portland.
So they have to run short trains.
So they can only run 2-car trains, like 2 S70 trains, and they are permanently linked together as an operating set.
So they have to compensate with high frequency.
Except all of their trains have to go over the Steel Bridge, which is very old, very slow, and very constrained by the fact that you have to operate 4 lines at 10 to 15 minute frequency over it.
On an old slow bridge.
On an old slow bridge that sometimes it's a lift bridge, so sometimes it lifts and trains are like if a Navy ship needs to go upriver of it, the bridge lifts and it disrupts TriMet operations for hours.
I did not think it was a lift bridge.
It is a lift bridge.
So we don't, but the lovely people of Portland need a new bridge.
They need to work on this. Yeah, so basically the current infrastructure is kind of at capacity, and TriMet and Metro are estimating they need to double the number of trains in and out of downtown by 2040 to meet demand for both regional and downtown to suburb trips, because they're expecting a doubling in ridership on the MAX during the next 20 to 30 years, because they are being aggressive about not being nice to cars.
Good.
Yes.
The climate.
And I mean, even if the Steel Bridge, you could theoretically cram that many trains over the Steel Bridge, but it's old and it's not in immaculate shape because it's over 100 years old.
The fact it's called the Steel Bridge
should
tell you everything you need to know.
It's a steel
honestly, I'm
bridge.
impressed that they're getting what they're getting out of it after 100 years.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. It was a good retrofit of existing infrastructure.
So, do they have a plan for that? Or
we will get to that later. Number 2 long-term issue, speed. Max, outside of downtown, fine, speedy. Average is like 30 miles an hour, whatever. It's
Good.
great. Except on the yellow line, which is a little slow, but it runs in a street, so what you expect.
Great. Sounds good.
Downtown, however, the Max is just frankly horrific. It averages 8 miles an hour.
Cries and tracks.
Yeah, cries and tracks. It is just incredibly slow, which makes it terrible for regional trips. Like, let's say that for some, who knows what reason, you're sitting at the Portland Expo Center and you need to get to whatever the southern end of the Orange Line is. Congratulations, you're going to spend most of your time sitting in downtown instead of, getting there. Or the Blue Line, you need to get, for some reason, from Gresham to Hillsborough. Instead of being an hour trip or an hour and 10-minute trip like that should be, it's an hour and 40 minutes because you spend a half hour sitting and going 2 miles an hour through downtown.
Great.
Wow.
Not ideal.
Yeah. So that's a big problem. And although it's very good for streetscapes, though, which is why it's a thing, because Portland's very much all about like that whole complete streets thing. So all their downtown streets are very complete, but that means the trains can't go fast on them. So there is a solution to this as well, which we will also discuss in the future. Long-term issue number 4 is coverage in outlying areas. As was stated earlier, there is very good bus coverage within Portland itself, in most places, except near the Red Line for some reason. Anyway, but almost all of the outlying suburban municipalities suffer from a severe lack of good bus service. It's just incredible how little bus service there is to feed the Blue Line in some of the suburbs, or the Green Line, or the Orange Line, or even the Yellow Line to an extent.
And especially as Portland focuses on doing infill development with their growth boundary, this will become increasingly important.
Very, very, very important. Anyway, number 4 is connections to the north. Currently, there is no high-capacity transit across the Columbia River.
Because of the thing that didn't get built.
Right.
Even though it should have.
And so the 500,000 people that live in Clark County, who many of whom commute to Portland, because Portland has an enormous daytime population. Like, it's half the jobs in the region in Portland alone.
They're doing like a legit center city. That's really cool.
They are very much a center city. So, that makes it a lot less appealing if you got to get, on a commuter bus than wait in traffic on I-5 to go into Portland, as opposed to on the Max Yellow Line, which connects to the C-Tran Bus Rapid Transit or whatever. And you see what I'm saying here? That's a real misconnection. And so that also needs to be addressed. Which, fortunately, is going to happen, because we are now into the future, where there are many things going on, because Portland is into continually improving and expanding their transit network. So there was going to be a new light rail line, which is going to groundbreak, I think, this year, called the Southwest Corridor Light Rail.
Filling in the aforementioned gap.
In the Southwest Corridor.
Did not see that one coming.
Not to the north, to the southwest, where there is currently the only place where there is no light rail.
Okay.
Funnily enough.
But what happened with that one?
Well, the ballot measure for it came up for a vote in August of 2020.
Oh.
When, we were having
a
pandemic and a recession, and everybody thought the country was probably going to die after the next election. And so voters were like, $1.5 billion for this.
Maybe sit this one out.
We're gonna hold off on that. So the environmental impact statement is done. As soon as they get the money, they can start building it.
Okay. Are they able to run a new ballot measure?
No, not for 5 years.
Oh.
That's the rule in their system. So it'll come back up in a couple years and it'll probably pass. But that's on hold for now. But that was going to be the next sort of big expansion of the MAX. But there are a lot of improvements going on right now. So the Red Line improvement project is currently being done, so they can take the Red Line all the way to Hillsborough instead of stopping in Beaverton, which is good, and will increase frequency on that portion of the line significantly. And also their big plan,
with a capital B, a capital I, and a capital G,
and $1 billion or a $4.5 billion price tag, is the MAX Tunnel, which would take the Blue and Red Line off the streets entirely and put them in a subway through downtown Portland.
And also under the river.
Under the river?
Yeah, you're freeing up. So this actually solves the two big issues with MAX right now, which is the capacity constraint and the speed constraint. Because suddenly, you've freed up 2 lines worth of capacity on the steel bridge.
Wait. I did not see that coming.
You freed up 2 lines worth of capacity on the steel bridge, so you can run everything that's on the steel bridge at higher frequencies, and the things that are going through the MAX tunnel at way higher frequencies because they're grade separated. Because the blue line would be, at that point, effectively grade separated from Gateway Transit to Hillsborough.
Nice.
And would be basically a light metro line, as the red line would be a light metro line.
Good.
So they're going to, be able to run a lot more trains on those lines. And also, if you're trying to get from Gresham to Hillsborough, it's going to take an hour and 10 minutes instead of an hour and a half because you're not sitting around downtown for half an hour waiting at stoplights.
Brilliant.
Wow.
So, very good project. Probably more expensive than it should be, but Obviously. It has to be done either way. So build it, and they're actually in the process of getting funding for it right now.
Good.
So they're working on it's a near future thing. Probably by 2035 it will be done. Sweet. At the latest.
For a project this big and expensive, that's not bad.
Yes. So according to TriMet, it allows regional trips to be sped up by at least 20% according to them. Some people have said it may be able to speed up blue line times by 40%.
Whoa.
Big improvement. Big. Also, you would be able to run larger trains on the blue and red lines if you wanted to. Because they would no longer be constrained to the streets, right? And you could expand the platforms in other places.
Well, I'm starting to see why this is the mecca of public
It's a
transit.
big project.
This is a really good
it's
project.
It's sort of unique in its ability to massively improve everything with one single project.
And it gets funded.
And it's going to probably get funded,
and completed reasonably soon.
Yeah,
yes.
I know, right?
Very much so. Big project. Very exciting, very important.
I had no idea before today.
Yeah, so soon you'll be able to take the MAX through the Portland subway, which is a very base thing to say, if you ask me. Yeah. So then also Metro, which is, as we've said, the regional transit agency, has these crazy plans to basically bring light rail everywhere in the metro area.
Wait, we're not done yet?
No. Once the Southwest Corridor is done, then they have a project to do a circular line out in the western suburbs and then in the eastern suburbs, and then there needs to be a relief line for the blue and red lines running through Gresham because that's going to be over capacity in 20 years. So we're going to build another light rail line along a couple streets over from Division, and then we're going to build a couple different ones. Oh, and then we're going to get that one to Clark County, except even bigger than we were planning it before because, Clark County's grown since then. So, yeah. They have a lot of plans. You should see their map.
To basically make a metro type system out of light rail.
Metro level coverage on a light rail system.
Wow.
Which is, all right, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take it for sure.
I'll take it any day.
Yeah, more immediate near future project is that the streetcar, the C Loop is getting extended into the Northwest Industrial District, which is getting redeveloped because there's not that much good industry there anymore. So it's going to be people instead of industry.
Reasonable.
Yeah, America do be like that.
Redevelopment good.
Yeah, so that'll be a 1.2 something mile thing. It's going to be real soon.
Cool.
That's going to break ground. So that's
Sweet.
good. Any other things? Yes. So
there's more?
One more thing, and this is sort of the biggest thing at the moment. So as we've mentioned, there's a lot of opposition to this project they're doing to replace the I-5 bridge across the Columbia River because it would expand the lanes.
Mm-hmm.
So the lane expansion is going to happen.
Rude.
Thank you, ODOT and WSDOT, which is Washington and Oregon's Department of Transportation. However, advocates managed to wrangle 2 good things out of this. Number 1, there will be a bike path with connections to all the islands. Bad connections, still connections to all the islands and stuff and places in between.
That's good.
So that's good. And number 2, what do you think that the state has forced ODOT to put onto the bridge?
Bus lanes?
Mm.
Trees?
Mm.
What?
Keep guessing. You'll find it eventually.
Brick buildings?
Light rail tracks.
What?
Yes.
That did not, in fact, occur to me.
They are being forced to leave space for light rail. And specifically build a portion of the bridge so that it can be easily converted to light rail in the future.
Good.
Very good. Very good. So,
that's advocacy.
So all of the problems that we were discussing are being addressed.
How?
Now.
How?
I don't know. They are working on all of them.
Could you Could you imagine if every single one of our problems here
was being addressed?
Had already had a solution
You're
made?
funny. You're funny.
As opposed to being kicked down the road till 2040 or 2050 or whatever.
You're a
probably faster.
funny man.
Yeah.
You're a funny man.
Jeez.
But yes, so Portland, future, incredibly bright as far as transit goes. And, current, also pretty heckin' cool.
Gee, I had no idea.
Portland Transit.
Go
Portland,
Burr.
Portland Metro Area growth. Go Burr. Portland tax base. Go Burr.
Yes, very much.
Growth boundary.
Go Burr.
Does not go anywhere.
Well,
Goes Burr a little.
It's like a machine gun on the edge of town. It just mows down suburban housing instead of people. Like, there's a single family home.
When the U.S. military
does an urban growth boundary. Yeah. But that is the history, past, present, and future of transit in Portland. I personally have been wanting to do this episode for a very long time.
Reasonable.
As Kyle and Alex can probably attest, because I have a slight fascination with the MAX in particular.
I don't blame you in the slightest.
Because it's very cool.
That episode left me a lot more satisfied than the UTA history.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much going on, and it's all probably actually going to happen.
I know, right?
Which is cool.
Actual progress feels weird.
Actual things actually changing in the physical world is such a concept.
Yes. And what an interesting idea. Oh, also, another thing. There is a proposal to run some express service on the Blue Line. That's a far future thing, though. So, anyway, ignore that. The Red Line would run local service on the West Side section, and the Blue Line would run express. There you go.
That's cool that they're even thinking about that.
Well, because there's space for quad track. But yes, thank you very much for listening to, if I'm looking at the clock correctly, what is probably going to be our longest episode ever.
Yeah,
that's right.
I would agree.
About that.
Yeah.
If you like this episode, please do like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a follow and a rating on iTunes and Spotify. And do consider becoming a patron, because we are actually posting Patreon content now.
Wow.
And being good at our jobs.
And you can help us decide things and stuff.
Yes, you can. We will... Patrons, there will be a couple polls and posts coming out for you guys, because there's a couple of things we want to go over with y'all in the near future. But... thank you very much for listening. Thank you to all of our... Crap, I forgot to pull up the Patreon page earlier so I can read off the patrons.
While Connor does that, move to Portland.
If you can afford it.
If you have money.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because they still do have housing affordability issues, rather regrettably.
Well, while Connor pulls that up, go ahead and become a housing developer in Portland.
Yeah, actually do that, because they have very much liberalized zoning. So, good. All right, so thank you to all of our patrons: Mike Christensen, the OG, Curtis Herring, director of the Utah Transit Riders Union, Phobos2390, I don't know who you are, but thank you very much. Those are our frontrunner tier patrons. Our Red Line tier patrons are Brian Smith and Jacob Whitecotton, and our Blue Line tier patrons are Ben Busath, DJ Will Watkins, hi Will, and Ethan McDonald.
Have a nice day. Library closes in 4 minutes. We better
All right,
get out of here.
Let's get out of here. Bye.